I've been taking a lot of algebra for, I'd say, this past almost 2 months. And, I've been looking at the rules and properties of, numbers and how to get, like, for example, quadratic equations and how to solve a linear function. Most of these concepts I learned in high school. And coming back as an adult now, or just in college, excuse me, it's a little bit of a refresher, and it also reminds me of how I used to think, and when it comes to calculating math and learning different equations and all that and the properties, I would say, algebra in itself, people can learn it in many different ways and forms that, when your professor may teach it, you might not get it right away. And it can be very beneficial for different methods of learning. For example, if I was learning about how to find a slope, and if my teacher to me doesn't necessarily explain it in a certain type of way, I could use my resources, like watching, different examples on YouTube and trying to find out which one works best for me and compare different methods. This is what this is what's great with I say solving equations and formulas, because people have different variations of how to solve a problem, you know, which is one thing that I would say I like about math, you know, but we know the answer has to be very specific. And, you know, excluding how to learn algebra and, the rules and all that, in this video I'm gonna give my overall thoughts on just algebra and, you know, why it's very different from when it used to, I don't want to say come out, but I would say since it's started, let's just say that, you know. And this is something that some people don't really point out, but I'm gonna just say this, man. Algebra itself, like, let's look at the word algebra. Algebra is a Arabic word, but in the European, society that we live in, and over time they've changed the context of the word to where the average motherfucker in America does not even know that this is an Arabic word, because the way it sounds is not how it's supposed to sound. This is pronunciation at its finest, or mispronunciation, excuse me. Excuse the noise in the background. Some niggas always be driving loud cars and shit. But nevertheless, like I was saying, the word algebra is supposed to be pronounced algebra. Algebra. And this word is an Arabic word. If it's an Arabic word, then it's created in the fucking Middle East, in Africa. You know what I'm saying? And this goes against what we have today in our school system. You have a subject that is not European. It's African. But over time, the colonization And the Europeans' mindset of, okay, if I have to change it for people to understand it better, I'm going to do that. But this is not necessarily the case at all, because how I see algebra now, looking at it from a point of view of somebody who's done it before, there's a lot of rules and concepts within algebra that make it a lot harder than what it is. Even though I'm not saying it's supposed to be, you know, simple to the point like 2 plus 2, but what I am saying is the rules and the properties and writing out the equations, all of that shit is doing too much, if you ask me, you know. And because the school curriculum and I would say the school board and everything that involves, like, the Department of Education, yup. The Department of Education, because I know that this is what they wanted, I've gotten used to it. But, you know, in order to solve a problem, there are rules and formulas that you are going to have to use in the context of what you are given, and you have to solve that using that formula, which is something, it's an unwritten rule, you know. Majority of everything of how you solve like a linear function or quadratic or whatever, nigga, there's a rule already for that. There's a formula for that. So what you have to do is use that formula to get that expression, variable, fraction, decimal, whatever, you know. But in the way of which these rules are written, some of them do not apply. Just to give an example, there are certain expressions in the context of, let's just say, a few lessons that I wish I had a book in front of me right now. Another thing that, just to give in context, that I don't have is I have an online book. I just do not have a physical textbook. But if you could just visualize, you know, all these rules, right, with solving equations and all that, you know, the nigga that decided, okay, I want them to go even more, like, it's simplifying and, you know, basically breaking down your answer into the smallest terms. You know, that shit in itself, I think, you know, whoever fucking came up with that idea really wants to make things more complex than what it is. Because algebra in itself, when it first came into fruition, it wasn't like you have to have this rule, and then when you get that answer, you have to have this rule. It wasn't like that at all. You know, you just had basic numbers and variables, and, you know, once you find out an answer, you don't have to break it down even more than what it is. You know, that's why with math, there's a few things that when you get an answer, you're supposed to leave it at that. You ain't supposed to fucking go in, go in depth even more to try to get it to the smallest term, you know. Now, some answers, or no, some equations are set up like that if they're asking for it, and some others are not, you know, depending on what it is. And this rule doesn't apply to every equation. It only applies to the ones that you know you're going to get a weird answer. So, that's just something that I've been doing for, I'd say, almost 2 months now, is trying to figure out the rule for this equation, and okay, what do I do with that answer? Is basically, what I've been on. And I have to say, it's kind of fucking hard if you ask me. But the way I approach it, uh, you have to really look at what they're asking. And if they're asking something that's very specific, you have to set up the problem in a specific type of way. You know, I know what I said just like basically was a bunch of. I explained it longer than I thought it would, but you could probably like, what's the word? You could probably understand what I'm trying to say. I just can't like explain it. And this is why math, like, it's hard to say it, but it's easier to write it out. And this form of learning is more visual with the student. Not everything we learn in school has to be discussed in the classroom. Most of the time, like let's say for math specifically, if you have an equation in your head, most of the time you know how to approach the problem and get the answer. But like I keep saying, with these like rules and shit in algebra, and with these, you know, I'd say even formulas, it's kind of like, damn, uh, you could get stuck and then you tell yourself, fuck, what do I do now? But that's what I wanted to just point out. Another thing that, you know, in school that I kept telling myself for this semester, because I do take 3 classes. One thing that I always used to do when I was younger was I didn't know how to, you know, approach a question on a test. And if you're familiar with how to study and how to like read test questions, first of all, you have to look at what they're asking. Because going back to math, 9 times out of 10 on a test, they're gonna want a very specific answer. So you have to really be familiar with what you're trying to get in the problem. And, you know, if you have good reading skills and if you can process information at a fast rate, I would say you have a likely more chance of succeeding on tests. You know, but the way tests are designed, especially for, you know, I don't want to bring black people into this, but the way you take a test, you know, uh, it may be given to you, but depending on your mood, what you're thinking about, you know, just random thoughts might pop into your head while you're taking this test. You might not get it. And in that sense, you might not just be focused. You're not focused on participating in this required assignment. And in the education system, every time people take tests, they'll always give you a maximum amount of time. And they always tell you to, when you can start, You know, the teacher will say, okay, class, take out your pencils. Remember, no phones. When you're done with the test, hand it up to me. You could leave after. We have nothing to do after class. Now, when the teacher says that, that is giving the students a little bit of anxiety, because if you have not studied for the test, okay, you're going to be there for a while, and you are mentally having to rush this exam. And this gives a lot of kids the wrong idea. Or this gives a lot of people who take tests pretty much I have to rush to get this done type shit. And you know, man, like, I pay attention to these things. Like, you know, if you have really good it's kind of a weird word, but like study skills and shit, you know, and if you give yourself like I don't want to say pep talk, but it's one of those things you have to tell yourself, I'm gonna do well on this test, or I'm going to give, like, let's say 75% in this test, and you've studied and you read over the material, you know, you will, because you have told yourself that you're gonna do good, you know, you've put in action mentally to where you haven't told yourself you're gonna fail and you don't feel like failing, you know. So if you don't feel like failing, you might do better than you thought. You might not get the grade that you want because you told yourself, I'm gonna do good, but it's kind of 50-50, you know. And just with like the school curriculum and everything, the school board, just the way like classrooms are designed for students taking these exams and courses and all that. Even my classroom, it's like, man, I don't even have like, what's the word? Fuck, there's a bus behind me. I don't even have like a classroom with windows. You know, the AC is on like the whole time. The lights in the classroom are dim. This is indicating that for me, you know, it might be different for you. This is an indication for me. I can listen to the teacher, but something is off. You know, the classroom may seem like it's comfortable, you know, because I sit on a decent, you know, chair, but there's just something that I feel is off balance. Maybe this is because I sit in the back of the classroom, or maybe this is because I don't understand my teacher's teaching style because I'm still familiar with her, or maybe this has something to do with I'm not familiar with the subject, you know. All 3 or 4 of these factors can vary upon student. And, you know, if you want to get your mind right in school, I would say do not downplay yourself. Try to tell the voice in your head that you want to do good and you want to put in effort. Because it's one thing mentally saying something to yourself, but it's another actually putting in effort, you know. And I say, man, like, putting in effort it can be very challenging, because even if you're prepared, you can still fail. So a few things factor, man. But going back to the rules of algebra and shit, you know, this concept that has been literally coming out of Africa, and the word algebra is Arabic, and the number system and all that. If niggas already know, like if somebody like me who already knows this, uh, you know, one question is, why have the colonizer, why has the colonizer changed everything about algebra? And also, why, where do they make up all of these concepts and rules for these equations and how to solve these problems? But I think I already know the answer to that. It's because everybody who takes algebra, trigonometry, all that shit, it's because the colonizer wants everybody to think exactly like him. So he's gonna make up unwritten rules for students to get stumped on them right away. Because when algebra came out to algebra now, when you compare them side by side, they're very two different things. So I think I answered my own question. Like, for when it first came out, it was not, what's the word? It is not what is in the school curriculum today. And so, this is not the only thing that Europeans have turned something like an African concept into something that's hard. There's a lot of things that the European colonizers, have taken from Africa or the Middle East and severely fucked it up. There's a lot of things. But since I just came back from school, I just had to make this video because this is just something that I've observed when I'm, doing algebra, math, because in the European's mind, he wants to make a lot of unwritten rules to solve these problems. And maybe I could be wrong. Maybe it's just something in algebra that how you approach every problem is different and it has its own way of means of solving that problem. I could be wrong, but you be the judge, man. When algebra first came out, and I wasn't fucking there, when algebra first was a concept to what it is now, you can't tell me the school system has, the school system and the European colonizer has flipped it into something to which the average person cannot understand. You can't tell me, And in the comment section, you could give your thoughts on this, but just a question I had to throw out there. But it's been real, y'all. Peace.